Once March Madness ended, in the past at least, typically this was a pretty slow time of the year, at least with basketball. Of course, spring football is right on the horizon. We've also got the open transfer portal window opening for college football here this next week, and men's basketball, the portal, recruiting, NIL, all that at an all-time high. Love it or hate it, it's here. And we got news on this Monday regarding former Iowa guard Tony Perkins. Of course, we've had his uncle Frank Henderson on this show a number of times, and I'll kind of just divulge what I can based on the intel I've received on Tony's decision to leave. I've talked a little bit about it in the past, but now that he's committed to a school, kind of give my 2 cents and also run through some schools that Tony had the opportunity to attend and turn down. So I'll talk about that in just a second. Do want to thank Under the Kitchen, though, Randy Engel and Under the Kitchen down in Mitchellville. Get your authentic Hawkeye, original Hawkeye artwork and get your player prints signed and bought right through Randy down in Mitchellville. He's got a number of deals with a number of high-profile athletes. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook for more details. He's also got a website. The website is underthekitchen.square.site. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Thank you to Randy down at Under the Kitchen in Mitchellville. So the news on this Monday, former Iowa guard Tony Perkins has committed to play for Dennis Gates and the Missouri Tigers. Interesting decision for Tony. I know some of the scuttlebutt on social media or the talk right now is, hey, this is all about money. Why would this kid want to play for a team that went 0-18 in the SEC? Yes, Missouri went 0-18. It's the first time in about 115 years that Missouri failed to win a conference game. This is a program with good history. They've got a good head coach that was hired from Cleveland State here a couple of years ago after a solid stint with the Vikings. And Dennis Gates is a guy who my guess is appealed to Tony Perkins on a number of fronts, one being play style. And I think that's the thing, that's the narrative we're going to continue to come back around to. Whether you believe this decision was primarily based upon NIL, I can't convince you otherwise. I know Fran McCaffrey made a statement here at a recent event that Tony Perkins was worth about $500,000 on the NIL market, and Iowa couldn't match that. A lot of people flocked to social media and talked about how ridiculous it was and about how Tony Perkins was leaving solely for the money. And I'm not calling Fran McCaffrey a liar by any means, but I do think we all need to have some perspective on the situation. And as it relates to college athletics, where it's at right now, and the initiatives that these coaches and these NIL directors, really the burdens that they're being faced with. I mean, it's their jobs, especially the coaches, the administrators of these different programs, to not only recruit players, but recruit donors and motivate donors. I think it was here maybe less than a year ago, you had Matt Rule over at Nebraska talking about how the going rate for a top-tier transfer portal quarterback was $1.5 to $2 million. Is that true? Maybe. I'm not saying he's a liar. And was what Fran said true? Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know. I can't confirm that specific number. But why are they saying it publicly? It's to ignite dollars, because the way that these coaches can succeed now as it relates to recruiting and competing with the big boys is by getting more donor money filtered down through NIL and the different programs, collectives. And so I'm just saying, as it relates to Fran McCaffrey saying what he said, that was his choice to say what he said, right? But ultimately, Tony Perkins' decision, whatever decision he wants to make, NIL funding is private funding. It's not technically done through the universities. And yes, there are flaws with it. So how much did Missouri guarantee Tony or make available to him to transfer to the Tigers? Who knows? We do know he had a bunch of other high major offers, including a couple other top schools, including Indiana and Oregon. But the offer list was just too big to count. I actually ran through an early offer list from Tony Perkins here a few weeks ago. But I think the big thing as it relates to basketball that Tony would tell you, and he's made this comment. In fact, he commented on social media earlier today that it's never been about money. Whether or not that is true, I can tell you one thing that has been consistent from him and his camp throughout the last year to 2 years has been style of play. And I think Tony, he was patient in Iowa. He was here 4 years. A lot of guys leave after a year, after 2 years, after 3 years. I do think Tony felt indebted to Fran McCaffrey. Fran recruited him when a lot of top major programs, including the Hoosiers, passed up on him at a high school. So you got to give credit to Fran McCaffrey and the staff. But ultimately, I think Tony has an opportunity to excel at a program that highlights his ability to dig down deep defensively and hopefully utilizes his length on that end of the floor. Not that he didn't showcase that. I think he averaged about 4.5 rebounds per game this past season, almost 2 steals per game, really solid numbers, averaged almost 15 points per game. So a really good get for Missouri. I know fans are frustrated. Iowa is in the portal. Fran's trying to go get a couple of players out of the portal. This is just how it's going to be each and every year. But don't be mad at Tony Perkins. He was here 4 years, and if it wasn't for the COVID year, he'd have graduated and he'd be forever enshrined as a Hawkeye, and a really good Hawkeye who averaged a nice number of points. I know he didn't play great down the stretch of the season, but I've always been a Tony Perkins guy, Tony Perkins fan. That's just who I am. I love the effort, the grit, the tenacity that he played with, and he was never the best of shooters, but I love the intangibles, and I think my guess is Missouri's going to take a big jump. I mean, obviously the only way to go from 0-18 is upwards, but he should help them primarily as a ball handler. My guess is he'll be playing with the ball in his hands a lot. And maybe if he gets one really solid year with the Tigers, he can end up on some late second-round draft boards heading into the 2025 draft. But really, purpose of this video was just to kind of divulge the news. If you hadn't heard it yet, former Iowa guard Tony Perkins has committed to Missouri. I have not spoke with Frank Henderson since this news broke. I did speak with Frank a few days ago, but at that time, Tony had not made up his mind ultimately. So once I get some word from Frank, if he's willing to come on here, definitely be happy to give him a platform and talk about it. But again, play style, and I'm sure NIL played a role, but I just think we all have to check ourselves and realize that we're not on the inside just because one party says one thing, another party says another. You don't have to necessarily just believe one or the other, but just realize, hey, I don't know all the details. Best of luck to him. He didn't do anything wrong. And guess what? If I was in that situation, if you were in that situation with an opportunity, even if it was solely about money, and somebody gives you $500,000 to transfer for 1 year to Missouri, probably going to do it about 1,000 times out of 1,000. It's just the reality of it. Appreciate you tuning in, folks. Do want to take a moment to give my sincerest condolences to a good fan, a loyal fan of this show. Doug Moore lost his mother here just the other day. We're thinking about you, Doug. Hang tight. We're so happy you're part of From the Hawkeye of the Storm family, and we are thinking about you. Thank you for being here, folks, and we'll talk to you next time.